Hello and welcome to the Unlocking Behaviour Change Podcast, the show all about psychology and changing behaviour. My name is Jamie West. I'm a writer, performer and a musician also, and I'm joined by Professor Robert West, who is an emeritus professor. I'll try to vary these intros up a bit, you see.
No. Well, that's right. But strictly speaking, I'm a professor emeritus. Apparently, for the nerdy people among you, which I'm sure is none of you, it goes professor emeritus, not emeritus professor. Probably something to do with the Latin or something.
Don't care about those distinctions in this casual show. All right, so we are now back talking about Combi 2.0. And if you haven't heard the last episode, please do give it a listen because we're going to run right on. And we've sort of started to expand out the idea of what Combi is and looking at it at a population level. So tell me, Robert, where do we go next?
Yeah, so another feature of Combi 2.0, apart from the making explicit the individual versus population level distinctions and then how that plays out in terms of how you specify your behavior, is that in classic Combi, we have the 6 segments. So we have capability, which is broken down into psychological and physical. And then we have opportunity, which is physical and social, and motivation, which is reflective and automatic. Now, over the years, we've been looking at different ways of making that more granular so that we can help people rather more specifically to identify what things would need to change in order to change a particular behavior. And one of the things we did in the original Combi was to link it up with a thing called the Theoretical Domains Framework, the TDF, which is very widely used still. That does it to some degree, but it's a bit lumpy in that because that was developed very much for health professional behavior, it unpacks some of the capability and opportunity and motivation things a little bit, and some of them more than others and so on. But we needed something that was going to do it to a level of granularity that would be most useful generically. And so while working with Public Health Wales on a tool to apply Combi and to do a sort of Combi diagnosis to help you identify what behavior change techniques you want to use to target the behavior, we've come up with what was originally 24 and is currently 26 subcategories of the capability, opportunity, motivation, targets. And I'm just going to go through a couple of them to start with, and then give you an opportunity to get a word in edgeways.
That's a lot of...
You've got your word in edgeways before I'd even started.
I know. It's a lot of subheadings. I just want to somehow reassure the listener that it's going to be fine.
It's going to be fine. It'll be fine. Because when you see what they are, you'll see, that makes sense. So if we take capability, for example, and we take psychological capability, we can unpack that in terms of a number of different things. But one of the things that's obviously really important is awareness of the behavior. So do they even know that this is a thing? Now, awareness then has 2 aspects to it that relate to the population and the individual Combi. In the moment, at the atomic level, as it were, it's awareness in the moment. So it's not just have you heard of the behavior, but are you thinking about the behavior right now? And so when you're then deciding what you want to do to change behavior, it could be anything from just making sure that they've heard of the behavior, they know what it is and what it involves, but it can also involve increasing the salience of the behavior in particular situations or generally, so that people are although in the back of their minds they're aware of it, they're not really thinking about it, to, yes, I'm thinking about it right now when I need to think about it. So this one, the level of awareness of behavior itself, has a number of different aspects to it, but it is clearly, a very useful thing that you want to know about when you're determining whether a person is likely to do a behavior or not. Because if they've never heard of it, they're not going to do it. And if it's not salient at the moment that it becomes relevant, they're not going to do it.
I'm quite interested in that idea of remembering in the moment to do something, or to sometimes, for anyone who's studied or done cognitive behavioral therapy, where you challenge sort of unhelpful thoughts and you replace them with more helpful thoughts. And you often do that in a worksheet sort of to begin with. But then what you try to do is incorporate that into your life at the current moment when your thoughts may be starting to spiral. And it's that in and of itself it becomes a habit and a process that sometimes needs topping up as well. You sort of get into the habit, but then actually things sort of, you start, in that example, your thoughts may start to spiral again, and you need to go back and work it through a bit more consciously before that behavior then becomes natural again.
Yes, exactly. And it's such a basic thing, isn't it? So it's no surprise that it would be very much something that would be, you'd find in cognitive behavior therapy, because you'd find it essentially in anything where you're trying to shape the way a person feels or thinks about things, as well as the way they behave.
Can I jump in? Because I have an exciting example that I want to give, which is how it's been talked about all the time recently for anyone who watches cricket, was the Ashes cricket where England lost. And the English batsman kept playing what can only be described as stupid shots at stupid times at crucial moments of the game when they didn't need to be flamboyant or go for big things. And commentators and people just all around were going, what? How are they not realizing in the moment, the game awareness at this moment, what they should be doing? What is happening in the moment? And it was very baffling from the outside. But that was exactly it. People are going, these players are good. They're quality. But in the moment, they're not. In the crucial moment, they're falling down. And that moment is what, presumably, when they try and rebuild the team in whatever their way they will, they'll be targeting those moments. What's going on?
Yeah, I'm sure they will. And I've noticed this myself in playing sport, particularly. The thing about sport is that timing is everything. Well, it's not everything, but it's absolutely essential. And when you're in the moment, about to hit a shot, it's what's going on then, right then, that matters, not even what you thought in the preparation for the shot. How many times have we sort of prepared for a shot? If you're playing tennis or something, like, I'm going to do a forehand topspin, as the ball's coming to you. And then suddenly, for no reason, apparently, you decide to try and do a drop shot, which goes straight into the net. So that is quite a nice example. But of course, it's so pervasive. So the issue of awareness and how you create awareness in the crucial moments. And I know I'm going to probably keep repeating myself on this, is an important part of the linkage between atomic combi and population combi, because it's atomic combi in the moment that you need to try and influence, but you're not there in the moment. Your intervention, usually you're not standing, next to the cricketer saying, don't do that, right? Do this. So your intervention is at some other moment during the training or whatever it might be. And that's when, at the population level and population aggregate combi, you've got to try and create the dispositions in that person or in their environment, which trigger the right capabilities, opportunities, and motivations in the moment. So again, it's like if you're in the doctor's surgery and the doctor's, advising you to cut down your alcohol consumption or to stop smoking. That's that situation. It's kind of like an aggregate type intervention that the idea is that intervention has to carry through. It has to change something in the world that sustains beyond that moment into the moment when it'll be relevant.
It's interesting, isn't it? Although I will say this, I'm quite interested in this idea. Anyone who's done any sort of face-to-face therapy, where it's like a talking therapy, one of the things that happens is that you try and not do too much to change things outside in the real world. You kind of talk it through and kind of if you try too hard in the outside world, it sort of backfires because you end up being a little bit hyper aware and you end up causing yourself more suffering. And so there's this weird kind of slow process where you slowly become aware of things and slowly it seeps in. And that makes me wonder about the time frame around some of these. It depends. If you're a cricketer, well, they've got their next match. That might be their last match. So they can't go, well, in 6 months' time or 2 years' time, we'll see if this intervention is has it been effective. There's different timescales on the interventions and what sorts of success you're hoping to achieve over those timescales.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, it brings up the fact that so much of the technology of behavior change is around the pragmatics of this particular task, the particular goal you've got in the scenario. So there will be occasions when the best thing you can do is to plant a seed and not to force the growth, but to allow it to grow and develop into dispositions, capabilities, and so on, or motivations that are going to do the job when the time comes eventually. And other occasions where you don't have that luxury, and so you have to do what you can. And that also actually brings back something else which is important with regards to COMBI 2.0 versus COMBI 1. Or not versus, but in addition to. And that is being more explicit about the granularity of the behavior that you're interested in. So if you've got, let's say road safety. In theory, you could develop interventions, and we do to a degree, develop interventions which don't just target one behavior like speeding or looking carefully or not undertaking reckless maneuvers and so on. What you do is interventions which inculcate this rather general attitude to road safety, being careful and responsible. And that then the idea is that would then have an impact on all these different behaviors. Maybe not a massive impact, but enough to be, to have a big effect. Versus if you say, right, as you say, I'm going to target this behavior, this behavior, and this behavior. And in doing so, you sort of miss the wood for the trees, as it were. So, these are pragmatic choices that people have to make when they're developing behavior change interventions. And there's no one right answer. I think a very important message for people developing interventions is that there won't be a single, it's like any technology, airplanes, cars, computer programs or whatever. There's lots of them that can do the same job. The question is, for you as an intervention developer, what is going to work, do the job for you given these circumstances? And you can relax a bit thinking you don't have to find a single right answer. But yeah, I mean, all of those things kind of emerge from this more precise, I think, and more structured way of thinking about COMBI.
So we've promised, how many subheadings did we promise? 26? Where are we up to?
Yeah, but we're not obviously going to go. Yeah, we're up to number 2.
Okay, great.
But I'm not obviously going to go through all of them. But when we do, hopefully before too long, publish the first paper on this, then you will see them. And many people, I would imagine, who are listening to this will be familiar with a tool that's going alongside it called the Cactus tool, which is called Cactus because it's the COMBI Assessment Criteria to Intervention Strategy Spreadsheet
Cactus.
Tool, which is actually available in its first form. Yeah, Cactus.
Oh, Cactus. So Cactus. Not exactly like the plant.
Not exactly like the exactly not exactly. Like
okay. Yeah. No, I like it. Go ahead.
But anyway, so we'll put a link in the description. But this tool, we've been working on it for a while, and the new version of the tool, which will take into account all this stuff we've been talking about, has or will have these 26 COM-B factors. So what I'll do is, rather than, I think, just go through all the capability ones or just some of the capability ones, what I want to do is just to, let's say, move over and give you one example from each of the other ones.
Sure.
Let's say opportunity and motivation.
I mean, I think that, one thing I was going to say was that a lot of this is very interesting, and the granular level, as much as I'm teasing about 26 subheadings, it sounds a lot all at once. But this is a huge model that is very useful to people, and I'm actually really interested in the granularity. I'm interested in what these are. We might not be able to go through all of them, but I don't think we need to speed through them just because they're really interesting. So anyway, take that as you will. You will.
Yeah, sure, for sure. Right, okay. Well, we could do what we like, can't we?
We certainly can, yeah. Till Ofcom get us.
That's right. Well, let's look at opportunity and social opportunity. And one of the items there that we often refer to, and now is formally included, is this concept of norms. And of course, for those of you are familiar with social psychology and the application of social norms, this is a huge area in itself. But there is a distinction made between what are called descriptive norms and prescriptive norms. And descriptive norms are what's actually going on, like 80% of people do X, and proscriptive norms are what people think about it. How much they approve or disapprove of it. So in COM-B, that is obviously naturally captured in a number of ways. One of them would be, the COM-B element would be how far the behavior is common and visible in the social environment. So that's obviously more than one thing. It wouldn't be enough for it to be common if the person that you're interested in or target population never saw it. So it's got to be common and visible. And that then will link to behavior change techniques that either make it more common so that it becomes naturally more visible, or making something that is already common more visible. So if we say, we know from our survey research that at any one time, a fairly substantial proportion of people are trying to stop smoking, but you can't tell, you can't see that because you can't just look at someone and tell whether they're stopping smoking. But if we can make that more visible so that when people are trying to stop smoking, it's clearer, or in our communications, we can bring that out, that would potentially address that target. So on the descriptive norm side, you've got both the prevalence, but also the visibility.
I did read a news article in the last couple of days, which talked about the amount of people who were actually not drinking at all, which was actually a lot larger than I had expected, because I'm somebody who doesn't drink very much. Sometimes, I will go months without drinking, and then I might remember to have a drink just to try and fit in, But talking about fitting in, I didn't realize that, there was like 20% or more people who didn't drink in the last year in the country. And I thought, oh my God, that's really good for public health. And of course, the main messaging I'd been reading was generally, getting people to try and stop drinking alcohol, or at least cut back a huge amount. And so it was interesting that was an interesting sort of, I didn't know. I would have guessed a much lower number. If you'd asked me how many people didn't drink in the last year, I mean, I might have gone 5%, I might have gone 3%.
Yeah. No, I that is interesting. It's a very nice example of how it's not enough if you're changing social opportunity, it's not enough for something to be prevalent or have a certain level of prevalence. You also want it to be visible. And very often what you're trying to do when you're shaping behavior is to increase the visibility of something that's already prevalent. One of the things that comes up actually with regard to that, with behaviors you don't want, you're trying to reduce the prevalence or incidence of, is to counter. There's a very natural tendency when you're developing messaging around a bad behavior, like let's say bullying, to say to accidentally create an impression that it's normative by saying things like, did you know that 40% of people have experienced bullying in the workplace? I just made that figure up, but and then
it's actually 90%.
It probably is.
No, I'm joking.
What you're trying to do is, which is perfectly understandable as a comms person, is you're trying to go, oh my God, this is a real problem. But what the subtext of that is, this is really common. And therefore,
I could just go around bullying people if I felt like it.
So you have to be terribly careful with that. But the other side of it, that's the descriptive norm side, is the proscriptive or prescriptive norm side, rather, which is how far the behavior is considered acceptable or desirable within the social environment, which is obviously not necessarily the same thing. And that's where you want to, in your interventions, if people are not aware of how desirable it is, you want to raise their awareness or undesirability of it. Or if you can create, in the social environment itself, you can shape how desirable and undesirable something is. Clearly, these are massive behavior change interventions that could have very massively profound impacts. And we were talking a bit earlier about the timing of interventions and sort of, whether you've got time to do something over a long period of time. Quite often what you want to do with these social norm type interventions are targets, COM-B targets, is to plant seeds. So it's not going to be one campaign. It's not going to be, you're not going to see an effect or, spike of X with a campaign, which is unfortunate if your metric that from the people who are paying you to do the campaign are expecting a spike. You're trying to create a change in the whole background culture. So improve this, for example, the whole culture within an organization around bullying, around it that not being acceptable within the environment, or safety culture in road safety, when you're driving and so on. So those are two, and I just want to the other one, which is actually extremely important and turned out to be very important with COVID, was how far are there clear social rules or expectations, i.e., laws and regulations about the behavior. Now, these things sort of go hand in hand, but one of the very interesting observations with COVID, and we saw this also with seatbelt legislation, was that you had this sort of informal approval. Yes, we think it's a good idea. This is, you should stay at home, or, in the case of COVID, or in the case of seatbelts, yeah, we should be doing seatbelts. But the behavior wasn't really happening. But once you then codify that as a formal rule, even when it's hardly enforceable in many cases, but the very fact of it being codified into a formal rule then cements it, and you get a boost in the behavior change. So those three aspects of social opportunity, the visibility and prevalence in the environment, the acceptability, and the formal rules, are three of these, more granular COM-B components.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm really enjoying learning more and seeing how you've expanded COM-B outwards into these just more specific areas when you go, oh yeah, that's exactly something to think about. That's exactly it's a little bit before you name it, it's kind of opaque. It's sort of something's there, and you're vaguely thinking about it, but you can actually go, oh yes, that's a sort of, what kind of norm is that? Oh, that's a descriptive norm, and this is prescriptive, etc. But anyway, we will be continuing on with this next time. But it just remains me to say thank you very much for today, Robert.
Always a pleasure.
And thank you for listening wherever you are. And we look forward to joining you next time on the Unlocking Behaviour Change podcast.